Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons, and we're going to talk about using Dungeons and Dragons to explore spirituality and what Dungeons and Dragons teaches us about spirituality. And we're going to do this because of a incredible answer that Neil Brennan, philosopher king Neil Brennan, um, gave recently about exploring spirituality and the dangers that can happen if you use the wrong source. All right, so let's dive into this. Okay, so first of all, Neil Brennan is probably, I think he's the number one philosopher king today. I think he is incredibly intelligent. He has wisdom, and he has self awareness. Now he only has a little bit of wisdom because he's not a person of faith, so that limits the cup that he can hold wisdom in. I think at any given time, Neil Brennan can hold three pieces of wisdom, and he has to drop one to pick another one up. Like he has to take one out of the cup and then put a new one in, right? But he definitely has wisdom. He says things that are incredibly wise, and I increasingly am trying to listen. So every single week, I'm an evangelical Christian. I go to my church, and I get filled up with intelligent discourse, um, emotionally stable discourse, and self-aware discourse. Right, my pastor is rock solid. Right, and that is where I am spiritually. That is just one of his sermon is one place where I'm spiritually fed every week. Right, but the rest of the world doesn't have this, right? You guys aren't going to a church with a strong doctrinal teacher. I know you aren't, right? Like, because I'm sitting in one and ain't nobody there, like macro level, and we ain't growing, right? Like, it's frustrating, right? So, so what really blew me away was Neil Brennan got into this, and he said, and the reason I'm so fascinated with him, because what happens if you take someone who's intelligent, wise, and self-aware, and you give them all the money to do whatever they want? Well, one thing is they're going to explore, right? Just like they're going to interact, they're going to explore, and they're going to combat some things, right? Like literally, he's an IRL adventurer, and he did take an adventure. So one of the things is he suffers from depression, and he was trying to fix this, right? And he started going down this road where he was using drugs to unlock the spiritual realm. He still does it. He uses ayahuasca right now to interact spiritually with deities, right? Like so. And but before he got to ayahuasca, he was warned. They were like, okay, you're a druggie. You're doing your drug thing, right? You ready for it? You really want you want to go there? DMT. All right, and so Neil Brennan explains that he was warned DMT was the nuclear bomb of psychedelics. He's like, and people were like, don't. And some of his friends were like, don't do this. You don't know what you're getting into, right? And so he says, I was warned, right? Well, he did it. He did DMT, right? And he said it put him into a 3-day journey. These are literally his words: a 3-day journey to the netherworld. And he doesn't qualify that. He doesn't like. He's not like, oh, like it was like, he's like, it took me to the netherworld, right? And you're like, and a relative a long time ago had told me, by the way, don't do drugs because they will open your consciousness to supernatural demons, and the demons will have access to your consciousness, right? And at the time, I was like, yeah, whatever, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, sure, whatever. I'm like, you're full of it, right? Here's Neil Brennan, right? Complete atheist, actually, he's an agnostic, complete agnostic, no belief in the supernatural, right? Until he started doing DMT, and then he's like, I went to the nether realm. He was like, what my relative was saying, yeah, you go right to door one of hell, right? And you talk to the demons and they talk to you, right? Like, he's very clear about it. Like, it was astonishing, right? And he said it was a mistake, right? He was in a place of complete fear and complete domination and complete being dominated by these things he was interacting with, and just this hellish like anguish and torment for 3 days. He says, I went to the netherworld for 3 days. And that's an astonishing statement, right? So the point of this is I go, I wanted to be spiritually fed. He wanted to be spiritually fed. I went to the gates of heaven, right, and got, and the evangelicals are like, hey, here, Jesus loves you. He wasn't willing to do that, so he went to the gates of hell, and they said, well, hey, here's a bunch of demons. We're going to terrify you for 3 days, but guess what? You don't have to wonder now. You know the supernatural is quite real. And that's why he's doing ayahuasca today, to try to talk to nicer demons. Like, he doesn't know that, but that's what's happening, right? He thinks he's talking to other spirits, right? He's not. So what's this got to do with Dungeons and Dragons? Well, we spent 50 years engaging with Dungeons and Dragons with our intellect. The next 50 years, and you could leave the chumpies back there. There's going to be a bunch of people who don't listen to my channel, who use Dungeons and Dragons, goblins in half, never achieve anything with Dungeons and Dragons, never become better, never grow, never, but you and me, we spent 50 years interacting with Dungeons and Dragons with our intellect. The next 50 is interacting with our emotion and interacting with our spirit. And the first lesson that Dungeons and Dragons has to tell anyone who wants to go on a spiritual journey is that supernatural is real, right? And finding that out is way better than spending 3 days in the netherworld, right? It isn't going to cost you $10,000 for some, to be, put into some tent, right? Like, and then watched over by people who probably aren't really qualified to watch over you. But Dungeons and Dragons is a much safer way to explore spirituality, in my humble opinion. So here's the kicker, okay? If you're an evangelical Christian, you don't need Dungeons and Dragons to explore spirituality. You could just listen to your pastor every week. If you're not, Dungeons and Dragons is a much, much, much safer, better path to explore spirituality. And it was built from day one to do that than DMT and the path Neil Brennan took, in my humble opinion. Every single word you just heard is my humble opinion. The important part is when I get to hear your humble opinion, when you get in the comments and send your traffic. Please consider subscribing, and have a fetch millennium.